This conversation is going to really contextualize all that we've heard for a manufacturing environment. And I can't think of two better panelists to share their expertise on this topic. And we're going to kind of scan the world, both US and global perspectives of what's going on production floor environments today, and we'll take a little bit of a crystal ball look as well. So we'll get right into the conversation. I'm going to start, Lerrel, with you. And just a fun fact on Lerrel. He is a roboticist. I don't know that we've had too many up here on the stage thus far. And he was one of the first, literally over 10 years ago, first to build large-scale data-driven robots. We saw many videos of kind of the evolution and progression of humanoid robots today and yesterday. So we can thank Lerrel as sort of one of the grandfathers of that technology. So Lerrel, what I'd love to kind of focus on first, your experience is quite global in terms of, on production floor environments. And when we've talked about robotics, I know you feel that there's a bit of a gap in the understanding and appreciation for what robotics can do in manufacturing. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about what you're seeing around the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. So when most of us hear about robotics automation, right, what we think of these large robot arms that are like trying to maybe weld together a car or do assembly to make your phone and so on. This is what we normally call structured automation. Right? So it's really in a highly controlled environment, made to solve a really narrow use case, often comes with very high investment because you have to buy all this equipment. So the challenge really with structured automation is that as your manufacturing needs are evolving, the CapEx you have spent in this equipment becomes obsolete. So here is where we are seeing this new wave of automation, which is really these human form factor robots. Folks like to call it humanoid robots, so it's a big umbrella. I like to call it human factor robots. And really, because we are building robots that have the sort of form factor of humans, it means that you can theoretically do the broad types of tasks that humans are able to do, right? It's not just the hardware, it's the brain as well. Right, there's probably even more accelerated progress in building the robot brain for these robots, which enable them to do things like contextual understanding of the world. Right? So imagine like on a manufacturing floor, you have this robot, it sees something wrong, it makes a decision of what to do next, of course, within a guardrail of what you set it for. So that's a sort of like place that we are looking at. There's this sort of old school automation with very structured arms doing things. There's this new school automation with human factored robots. And now just going back to your question, where are we seeing this type of automation? Not much in the US, unfortunately. Most of the advancements and the appetite is actually from folks in China, folks from South Korea. A lot of this is driven by the pressures of the demographics, acute labor shortages, things of that sort. We are facing the same labor shortages, acute pressures in the US, but we've just been slower to adopt it, I think. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll explore that further in this conversation. Ethan, I'm going to turn this to you for maybe more of a US-centric perspective, but I have to start out with a fun fact on my other panelist here. So Ethan, interestingly enough, began taking college courses at the ripe old age of 12 years old, yes, 12, formally entered college at 15 years old, and completed his PhD at Harvard at, again, the ripe old age of 23. So don't let this baby face fool you. There have been decades of experience in manufacturing floors. CEO of Magnet, and in that role, he assists US manufacturers, many small and mid-sized manufacturers, with exactly what we're talking about, adoption of innovation and technology, and we'll also talk about implications on the workforce. But if we can, Ethan, I hope you guys don't mind me sharing those fun facts about you, but I just thought they were both so interesting. Let's take us into what you're seeing, practical application of the evolution of technology on US manufacturing floors.
So I'm going to start with that word practical, and it's very near and dear to my heart for a few reasons. So first, let's back up. Manufacturing today is just full of contradictions. We see it's critical for our economy, but there aren't enough people going into it. There are dark factories being said, these are being set up, but yet the number one need for every company is yet more people, not those dark factories. It's changing so rapidly. We have 3D printing, and you have AI, and people predict, oh, that's just going to totally remake the industry. We're not going to do anything traditionally anymore. And yet, both of these technologies in manufacturing have been around for a very long time, and that is not the direction that manufacturing is headed. We built the American dream on the back of manufacturing here and entrepreneurship, and yet VC money that goes to support manufacturing companies today is very, very little. We are the number 2 producer in the world, behind China, in America, and yet we don't act like it, and people have no idea in the general population that it is that important. That standalone, the manufacturing economy of America would be the 8th largest economy in the world, 7 including America before it. So why? Why is this? Is it just that manufacturers are slow and they're just bad at adopting this? Is it that they're happy and complacent? Are we just listening and ignoring the futurists and say, hey, that doesn't mean anything? I'm sure in some cases, yes, but AI has been being integrated into manufacturing for decades. I mean, they have already been using this. Automation is the lifeblood of manufacturing and has been since the beginning, and it's now just being considered with Gen AI for so many other industries. 54% of private US R&D, 54% comes from manufacturing. So it all comes down to this word practical. And I was talking actually to Ted earlier, and he's sharing these AI models that can look and actually predict, what sort of emotions you have. To me, that is impossible. That is crazy. That is amazing. And it's going to take billions of dollars to do that. And that's incredible. It can change the world. And for that same billions of dollars, you could set up one very large manufacturing plant here to make one product that may be very important, but that's one facility. Practical means what is actually achievable when the manufacturing capital costs are so incredibly high. So dark factories, for example, that will be applicable for some very high repetition, large volume factories across the world. But that has been a dream since the 80s. And since the 80s, we have tried to improve our sort of automation and all those things, but the reality is the promise of that automation never reaches the point of having no people because there are always new things. There's new robotics, there's new changes, and the capital investment to keep on changing in that way just doesn't keep up. So what are these practical things, the things that all manufacturers should be thinking about? They go back to the fundamentals, but the distinction is here, every manufacturer needs to do more of them and faster than they ever thought was possible. One is automating everything, and I'll throw out buzzwords, can talk about them later. Digital twins, where you're trying to simulate what's happening in your factory before you make changes. All the robotics, digital thread, you connect all of your data systems, something KPMG, I'm sure, is working on with many companies. Data monitoring, real-time data monitoring, using your data to predict what's going to happen in your shop floor, and you can use AI in all of that. Number 2, new models, and we'll talk about this, for people recruitment and education and engagement with the community. We have to do this differently and put way more money into culture and training of people on shop floors. And the third thing is more customer-centric backed innovation. And that means more companies, because the private market may not do this, investing in those startups who are manufacturing, more consumer feedback using all the tools of AI, more personalization, and more rapid prototyping, and we just need to do way more of it way faster.
So was I wrong on passion for manufacturing here?
That is the longest answer I have. Now the other ones are short. I promise.
I think you guys catch where both of our panelists are coming from in that production floor perspective and truly, an appreciation and a passion for manufacturing. So we're in the right place. We can't escape, I think it came up in almost every conversation thus far here, the convergence of technology, innovation with people, right? We talk about talent, workforce in manufacturing, typically headcount-heavy organizations, whether you're talking about kind of core production. MRO is a growing area for many of our manufacturing clients. So let's talk about this concept. And again, really curious what you're both seeing. Lerrel, if you don't mind, I'll go to you first again. When you tour manufacturing facilities around the globe, what are you seeing? I know there's sort of this notion of the challenge of technology and marriage with human talent, but what are you seeing around the globe?
Yeah, so I think hands down, it's very clear that in the US there is acute labor shortage, right? So I've been to plants in like biopharma, data centers, semiconductor, energy plants, all like big areas that the US is looking to grow in. Let me just give you an example. So in the semiconductor space, right, next 5 years, we are projected to have unfulfilled jobs of around 70,000 in the technical space, right? So these are like 70,000 people that are needed to like operate a semiconductor plant. So when you're thinking about like US AI, how to leapfrog over there, where are we going to get these 70,000 people? How are we going to train them? How are we going to keep them in our plants, right? So I think robotics is the only answer here. It's the only way in which we can upskill people, right? Most of the robots we create, there are humans involved, but it allows humans to sort of magnify the level of production that they can create. Because for each human, there are maybe like 5 to 10 robots out there that this human is sort of overseeing. So I do think this is the only answer. If we are looking to become a dominant force in like semiconductors or data center or any of these types of things, we have to figure out how do you bring robots in there as soon as possible, right? I also have seen a sort of like hesitation from most traditional manufacturers, which stem from their use of automation in the past, right? So they have probably tried out some industrial arms like 5 to 10 years ago, and they're like, oh yeah, after like 2 years, we had to like change them up because we had some new need, right? But like they are like holding on to that memory from like 5 to 10 years and keeping it now, right? Imagine like, like in 5 years, we have ChatGPT, right? So like in the next 5 years, what are we going to have next? So I think we are really missing this ambitious, forward-thinking nature in our manufacturing sector. I'm not sure what's the right way to fix it, but this is clearly a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, that notion, and we've heard that, right? This, whether you want to call it being nimble, agility, when you have a capital-intensive advanced manufacturing facilities all over the globe, how can you be taking a drink from the fountain of new technological innovation, and certainly at the pace that's coming out is a challenge and expensive. Let's stay on the workforce thread, and Ethan, I heard you allude to that as well. And maybe it's, the convergence of technology and people, but we have talked about this labor shortage in manufacturing, and you alluded to maybe some innovation in how we look at attracting, retaining, developing talent. Can you share a little bit with us?
So by and large, this shortage, you can tackle it and say it's many different things. Well, people don't like it. They think it's stigmatized. They don't understand all the technology that's involved. People have been let go in America for many years as automation has come on. You can point to all these things. And the reality is the solution lies in fixing all of them at the same time. And that's why the workforce challenge has been so intractable in this country, because you can't get somebody to do a great training program if they can't transport themselves there. If they don't know about the career, why would they ever consider it? If they can't get childcare, if they can't get that nobody around them goes to that job, they're not understanding what are the requirements for that job. You need to put all of these pieces together. I celebrated on Monday in our organization in Cleveland. We just put 3,000 net new people into manufacturing. A good portion of them are second chance citizens coming out of being formerly incarcerated. A lot of them are students. A lot of them are adults who are just getting better jobs. They got into this because we brought the 70 workforce organizations, the government, and the businesses who led the entire thing together to be able to say, you will fix every piece. And companies, you're going to strategize this just like you strategize in your business, and you're going to see this as a shortage, and you're going to fix all the supply chain pieces along the way. So doing those sorts of approaches and then coupling that with all sorts of things we talk about, apprenticeship, these sorts of things, to really upskill them so that they have a career, and whether it's at your company or somebody else's, the environment creates enough people that actually see this as a potential. That's what it takes, and I could go 10 levels deeper into that, but that is going to be the only winning strategy for America to truly get that first run rung in, and then they're going to have to upskill themselves to get them to be able to run those robots.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things we've seen, and it sort of aligns with what you were talking about, a little bit of this outreach, like into the community. We've seen a lot of our manufacturing clients take over the curriculums of these trade schools, vocational programs, and even take some of their more tenured manufacturing shop floor employees and convert them into instructors. So one, they are literally teaching the skills that they need and getting a great pipeline, great access to that talent. So that whole attraction factor, if you're the people who skilled them up, much easier to get them interested in getting employed with your organization. And something we can explore further. I do want to talk about another kind of buzzword that keeps coming up around resilience, right? And particularly with respect to the supply chains, which is a pretty complex ecosystem of functions and process. But Ethan, I'll volley this one to you first. What are you seeing? Are there real strides in, especially coming out of the pandemic, talking about transparency of your tier 1 to a tier N suppliers? Can you talk to us about strides made under resilient supply chain?
I think there's way more talk about this than there is actually action.
Okay.
And so certainly people are evaluating it. A lot of tire kicking, a lot of, with tariffs, where am I going to put this? Like those conversations are being had. How much it's being activated beyond I need to move this for tariff purposes is unclear to me. There are paradigm shifts to make this work. I mean, if you look at China, you can say, well, they've got these supply chains that are so interlinked, you run down the street and you get what you need. That is a lot of transparency. That is a lot of convenience. And that's something, even if we reshore, even if we bring this back, that is something that we will have to grapple with as a disadvantage in America from that perspective. And transparency helps and systems help, as do paradigm shifts. So we heard about those nuclear reactors being totally redesigned, in part to remove that complicated supply chain. You think of additive printing, right? You can make products and design them so that they do not require nearly as many multiple components. That also reduces cost. So there's a paradigm shift that I do think will eventually come that has not settled because those design changes take a while. On the process side, I think what's going to come more immediately is all the stuff around AI integration into ERP systems to make the purchasing process and identification easier, smoother, tracking, all of those things, scheduling, all of that much easier. But the real question is, how do you monetize the resilience into companies? We saw right after COVID, things went back to normal, that disruption. Since everybody faced it, everybody raised their prices, everybody had lead time problems, and nobody, necessarily got a huge competitive advantage during that time because they were faster than anybody else. So how do you actually take advantage the next time there's a collapse, or how do you tell somebody that, yeah, I'm paying more to hold more inventory, I'm paying more to have redundancy, I'm paying more to use a supplier not in the cheapest country, and that's going to benefit you, and I'm going to be able to make money off of it. And that's what we have to figure out if we truly want long-term, sustainable, and we're and not sustainable, but just supply chains that when they're perturbed, we don't end up losing stuff on the shelves. I'm also going to say that the energy piece that we've heard a lot about, that's going to be a resilience piece. A third of our energy goes to our manufacturers in the United States. So whatever happens there and reliability, that is long-term chief of mind for manufacturers. By the way, all this AI data stuff, they're directly raising manufacturing goods costs because they're eating up that energy if we don't supplement it with things like nuclear and add more capacity.
I want to explore this notion a little further. Lerrel, I'll take this to you. We talk about, all of this costs money, the notion of investment. Let's talk about it maybe specifically with AI, right? AI is an enabler for manufacturers. How do you work with manufacturers if they're hesitant about, hey, I've got to come back with a very clear return on investment to my senior leadership, to my board. There's sort of an avalanche of possibilities, possible avenues for me. Where do I even start? How do you navigate those conversations?
Yeah, so I think the hesitance from a manufacturer is totally valid, right? I think here is something which I think people don't realize as much, is that working with these robots can be a lot cheaper than a high CapEx intensive equipment that you want to bring in your factory, right? Because when you're using these robots, it's more like a robot as service. You can also do like a POC to see how well these work on your front. So if you are not familiar with this type of technology, I would highly recommend gaining a familiarity with it, either through these type of POC, like contracts or just speaking to like a technologist, right?
Love that.